Hello, everybody. Welcome to this November AuthorTube panel on home in historical fiction. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to my guests. I wanted to let them say hello, and I'll give them a short introduction before we get started. So to my whatever this is in StreamYard, I wanted to let them say hello, and I'll give them a short intro. I muted that before I started. I swear I did. To my left is Vanessa Riley, an award-winning author of historical fiction and historical romance. She has stories that showcase the hidden histories of women of color and emphasize strong sisterhoods and dazzling multicultural communities. So hello, hello.
Thank you for having me.
Yay! And Susanna Kearsley down below here is a former museum curator, avid amateur genealogist, and New York Times bestselling Canadian writer of modern Gothic novels that interweave contemporary suspense and romance with historical adventure. All the things we love. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be here.
And we've got people in to say hello. We're going to get started with some questions, and I just want to invite people to write them in the comments if you have questions for our superstar authors as we go. We'll have time throughout and at the end to address some of those. So home and historical fiction, what do I mean by that? Are we talking about architecture in different time periods? No. I wanted to get to something that I started last November, which is the concept of home. And when we think of home and the holidays and things like that, we have in our American-centric, sorry, Susanna.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm used to you.
we think of Thanksgiving and the sort of story that we've started to deconstruct, thankfully. So I wanted to dive into that aspect in historical fiction because we're in the business of deconstructing stories and seeing what they really looked like and everything. So I'm so excited. If you can't tell. The first question I had was just to ask you to give some personal context and start with, where are you right now? Where did you grow up? Where do you feel at home? Where do you feel connected to? And are those a mishmash of places? Give us a little bit about your personal background.
You go, Vanessa.
Okay. Well, I am currently in a suburb near Atlanta called Mableton. I don't believe we have a mayor. That's how small this place is.
Oh.
I keep waiting for a mayoral election. I'm like, we don't have one. Okay. So yeah, I live a suburb of Atlanta. I grew up in a small town called Aiken, South Carolina, where previously we were known for the refrigerator Perry from the Chicago Bears. That was our big claim to fame.
Okay.
And a nuclear power plant. Those are the two things that we're pretty much known for. I did my education at Penn State University, where I got a master's in mechanical engineering, a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and then I went to the West Coast and got a master's in industrial engineering management from Stanford University, and a PhD in mechanical engineering also there. Spent the better part of my youth at General Motors and high-tech startups. But I love writing, and I always have loved writing. And when you have a passion for something, I firmly believe the opportunity will arise, and I'm thankful I'm here.
Thank you.
I'm super familiar with Aiken, South Carolina, because that is my sister married an American, and that's where they settled, Aiken, South Carolina.
This is kismet.
I know. Yeah. So
along with the Starbucks conversation, yes.
Yeah. So my nephews were both. My younger nephew was born there. Totally, I know all about it.
Have you been to the Wilcox Inn?
I have been.
Every time every time I go to South Carolina, maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
I pick up my aunt and we go and we have lunch at the Wilcox.
But my favorite place, and I don't know if it's even still there, is Malia's for the steak salad, like downtown. I don't know if Malia's.
I don't know if there's. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know if they made it through the
pandemic.
Yeah, I've been there before. They're good food. But that used to be a spot until we jumped over to Wilcox.
I know. So it's a great place. I love the way there's a certain way the light comes through the pines in Aiken that is that just they were. We'll probably get into this idea of home and you know what makes a place a home, but the I always know when I'm approaching Aiken because the light just sort of filters through the pines in a certain. It's just like there are certain things that let you know. And the anyway, so I was not born in Aiken. I was born to the west of Toronto, but my family didn't stay there for more than a couple of months after I was born. I was born in the city where my parents and most of my grandparents, except for one who was Irish, had been born. So the long history in that place. And then my dad is an engineer, mechanical engineer, another point of connection. And so he immediately took our family and started us moving. And we stayed in, we sort of lived in places for like a couple of years at a time. And the place where I spent kind of the largest chunk of my childhood and then returned again as a young adult is a place on the shores of Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes in Canada. So that's kind of, again, a place full of pine trees, a place that where I consider my closest I have to home. But we were always in motion. We lived overseas. We lived in South Korea. We lived in the States. We lived in Bay City, Texas. We lived, all over the place. When my parents stopped and, kind of, well, they didn't even stop. I was going to say they kind of put down roots, but they didn't really. They kept moving in their way. But I sort of veered off and started moving in my own way. I went and lived in Wales for a little bit, and then just kept moving. And then I got married to a guy who had been in the same place where he was born for most of his whole life. He had been in the Air Force. So while he was in the Air Force, he went all across Canada, but then most of the time he'd been in the one place. And I have been in this place where he was born for 20 years, which is why my writing room is a huge mess because, it's the first time I've been in a house for that length of time. But for my upbringing, we were always in motion, always going into a new place, always meeting new people, always going into a new school, always the new kid in school, always with, having to make new friends and stuff. And so that had a huge effect on, my character and I'm very talky, but I'm super shy, which is a really interesting juxtaposition. But it also, most of my characters in my books are kind of like that too. They're going into new places all the time and always trying to find where they belong. And I think that's where it comes from. Right.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a perfect lead into the next question, which is, in your books to date, where have you chosen to set home for your characters and for whom, and any particular intention behind that when you envision where your characters fit in, where they belong? Vanessa.
Okay. Well, in my most recent book, which is Island Queen, hold on, moment of shameless promotion.
It's that beautiful, beautiful cover. So pretty.
Oh,
I can do that too. Ta-da!
Yeah. Dorothy, one of the arcs or threads is what is home in Island Queen. And it becomes what she defines it, and it changes in context. When she's young, it's the hut, but the hut is situated so she's always seeing where her father's at in the big house up the way. And she's grappling with this, my father's free, my father owns the plantation. I have some privileges more than others, but yet I'm not free. I'm still property. I'm still chattel. But she's got this context of home with her mother and her sister that is stronger than anything and enables her to dream and feel safe. But it's always that definition, and then things change, and now home is no longer safe. So she ends up having to flee, and the next spot is Demerara. And Demerara, she's partially rebellious because of things that have happened to her, the trauma that she's lived through. And she's still trying to find who she is, and she's falling in love for the first time. And so she thinks she has a new definition of home, but it's temporal. And there's so many definitions, but for for Dorothy, it's where she is and where she feels safest, and when she's with family, because family is the most important thing for Dorothy. Her family needs to be free. They need to be safe. They never need to ever feel that they could possibly be enslaved again. And so her definition, as she continues through her travels, it's always the home is what she's made, but it's made by having her family close to her and everyone being safe.
And there's a lot of different islands that they hop around to. So it's kind of like a geography course. I was realizing I needed to see that map at the beginning to like ground myself on where all the islands were. It was fabulous.
Such a good book. The in mine it's in a couple of places, but like it starts in Edinburgh, Scotland, and the story, I write dual time, so the present day is 1707 Scotland, Edinburgh, and the past story goes back to Perthshire, which is up at the edge of the Highlands in Scotland, and brings you down into Edinburgh, and also a little bit of it comes over into Long Island, the North Shore of Long Island, and up into there, and it kind of winds around. I won't tell you where it ends because that would spoil the ending, but it so those are all places that have connections, with the exception of Perthshire. Those places also have family connections for me too. So it was kind of interesting writing some of that as well. So sometimes when I'm setting these stories, you're kind of backtracking through your own family connections and thinking, I had people that walked here and I had people that knew this stuff. And you get, you meet people through your research, and you know that if I'm using real life characters, I know that they walked there. So it makes it more interesting to do the story for me, to be able to stand on a spot and try to picture the characters, standing there. It makes it fun.
And with both of your fabulous women characters, of course, there are no plaques for people who are in history that you're investigating, because they're voices that have often been silenced, and you're doing the work of bringing them back up, which is lovely. So I'll take this little opportunity to say, go get the books. I've got links. I'll put them in the chat while we're going through our next question. But Island Queen and The Vanished Days are the fabulous latest books of these two wonderful authors. So I can recommend them both. So there we go. The next question was a little bit of what you guys already discussed. So how would you define home for Dolly Kerwin Thomas and Lily Aitchison? I had things about where you feel safe, where you choose to be rather than where you are left by the sands of time, and where your family is. So maybe, what about not in the latest books and your other works? Have you changed over time? Because you've both written, I want to say decades worth. I asked Vanessa, and I forgot to ask Susanna before. So 21 plus books for Vanessa, and I counted 15 on Susanna's page.
Yeah, I think I'm up there. Yeah. We're up there. We're getting there. Yeah.
You'll be old enough to drink in no time.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. Hey, I just drink out of sight of everybody. We're sneaky up here. We're just, we drink in the woods. That's what.
For my first books, I centered them in London, because the beginning of my career it was more so gaining acceptance that I could tell these stories. I could tell them with authority, and someone may have been more aggressive, but I was more so following, what's comfortable to the Regency reader, what's comfortable to someone who likes Georgian history. And so I wrote stories fitting that vein. So we start in London, or London centric, or some of the countryside of London. And you're bringing in those familiar elements. And then as you get bolder, I did South Africa, Port Elizabeth, which was an English colony. And now I'm heavily into the West Indies. The West Indies is just a tremendous part of the Regency and Georgian history, actually world history, because of the impact of the sugar trade. And so, I'm surprised, honestly. The more I research, the more I find. I'm so surprised that this has been hidden, that it's ignored, and I get that the history sometimes is hard. We're talking about suffering. We're talking about tragedies, sin, all the different things, all the stains of mankind are exhibited during these periods. But there are also periods of exploration, and there are periods of survival. And, there are wonderful stories of women who did incredible things against the odds, and they need to be told. But in a careful context, you have to be careful of how you write the story so that you are not falling prey to stereotypes. Because it's like my favorite is women. Women of certain ages would never do this, never do. Take all the nevers away because they did do it. That's probably why there's a rule, because they got caught. So, it just, yeah. So my stories now, you will see them heavily influenced for the West Indies, if not in the West Indies. And of course, I love my London. I love London. I love the rich history, how you can still go there and see the monuments and buildings that existed during the 1700s, 1800s that I'm writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the idea that that you could have the economy in London so supported by the West Indian trade and not have people from the West Indies walking around in London, is absurd. Of course, London was not a white place. Like London has never been a white place. There's a I'm setting up the book I'm writing now. I'm setting in 1613, and there was an enormous community of all different, but an enormous Black community in London at the time, and nobody writes about it. Nobody talks about it, and it was huge. It was, and you get there are some wonderful academic research books that I'm referencing and stuff like that to try to create the right look for London at the period. Because if you have your characters walking through London and it's all white people, you're doing it wrong. You're not painting things as they actually looked. And if you're basing your Regency on Georgette Heyer, you're doing it wrong, because that's not what the Regency looked like. And the West Indies has been the source of trade for America. That's where all the American trade, like I had ancestors that were trading out of Long Island and trading out of New York and stuff like that back in the 1600s and 1700s and everything. Where do you think they were getting their stuff from? Where do you think they had their brothers and stuff set up? It was all in Jamaica and everything. And so you have to include that if you're going to be telling the story of America. It has to be included. These people did not just sort of magically sail their ships out to some mythical island and come back with sugar. It was coming from somewhere. So it was like, oh look, sugar and tobacco and molasses just wound up in the New York docks. It came from somewhere. So you have to include that economy. And it's,
you're talking about 80%.
Yeah.
So basically, 8 out of or $7 to $8.
Yep.
For every $10, 7 to 8.
1640, I think, was when the British took Jamaica from the Spanish, and and that's after that was when they started, and it was shortly after that they decided that they couldn't do it with just white labor alone. They had to start bringing in Black labor. So you do the math from so it even when I'm writing. At the time I'm setting the Vanished Days, and that's where they're sending all their convicts is to the Barbados to help supplement the labor and everything. So it's
preposterous.
You have to include it. You have to include it, and it's just one of those things. I find that the Venn diagram of the people that will not accept a Chinese actress playing Lady Macbeth because of historical accuracy, and the people that don't want to hear about the true history of America, or England or Canada is like a perfect circle to me. Like it's just kind of like you have to tell the whole. An economy gets its stuff from somewhere.
Right.
So all those people sitting in their sitting rooms in Scotland that I'm writing about, and all those people sitting in their sitting rooms in New York that I'm writing about at this time, that they're supported by an economy that comes from somewhere, and you have to tell the truth of that.
Right. And it's interesting when you think about the stories from those times that we normally hear about, it's kept silent, but it's because in that time everyone knew it. But we've lost in translation over time the fact that everyone knew it, and now no one knows it, and they accept the painting of the one thing that is shown, and we're like, oh, tobacco lords built Glasgow. I wonder how they got that money. Like, yeah.
It's when you go back and you begin reading the books and you see those authors of the day were talking about it, like in Mansfield Park. Every time the uncle has to go back to Antigua, it's to set his plantation right, because the money that is fueling his lifestyle, his big fancy houses, is coming from this plantation. So he's got to go put a new driver or a new and driver's not carriage driver. This is just another term for a commandeur, or the people who actually work the folks in the field. There's my favorite version of Pride and Prejudice is the A&E version, the 1990s version with Colin Firth. And he is searching for Lydia and Wickham, and they have him in London, and he's sweating, and a little boy runs out with his tankard of ale or water, and he's drinking it. And you see this street, and there's not a single person of color on that street. Where he was particularly looking for them, he should have seen at least one, because that's how many there were. There should have been at least one on that street, and you see nothing. So you can't, as Susanna is saying, you can't use, Hayer, we give her due because she made the genre popular. But she was fallible, and she had her biases. If you go back and you read some of her things now, you'll see very anti-Semitic language in these books. And so it's like, are you trying to uphold because of this pure idea of what things were? And as opposed to accepting, hey, this is a woman who made a living writing some really interesting books. Yeah, she didn't get everything right, and she may have put some bias into it. Appreciate them in their context, but do not use that as the model to exclude anything else. And I think that's where we're at now, where we're understanding this is complicated, much more complicated. And to understand the dynamics, you really, like Susanna said, sink into the culture of those time frames. Where did things come from? Why were they happening? And what's the causes? It's we really need to divest ourselves of our 20th century thinking and really look at what was going on, why was it going on, and who's benefiting, who's not benefiting, and why does the world stay as it is during that time frame? They needed labor. They couldn't figure it out any other way. They probably could have, but they didn't want to.
They didn't want to.
Pay a livable wage. Hey, how about that? So you guys have both put a very good economic frame of like the times over this, but I wanted to get a little bit back to like people and the feeling of home in this. I'm going to skip ahead to a thing and then try to explain it so no one gets left behind. But I was going to talk about migration and nostalgia. Most people are familiar with nostalgia, the longing for a place that you are no longer in, like the homesickness feeling. But I was reading a book called All We Can Save recently about climate change, and they talked about in one of the essays Solastalgia, which is when you remain in the same place, but the land around you changes so much that you have a feeling of sickness because you miss how it used to be and what used to feel like home. And I had this like huge moment, right? So this is a climate change, newly coined psychological term, but I feel like, gee, I wonder if this happened to the people in 18th century West Indies. You think? Like, because we get a lot of descriptions in Island Queen about the rebellions and the changing of the land and the people. Well, we don't hear before that, but we hear like the planter class and the different conflicts of the people who live there. So I wanted to ask about solastalgia and maybe about point of view. Like, what are we diving into? If we're trying to relate, as I do, our 21st century experiences with what we're putting into our historical fiction, do you have moments that you can point to in your books where it feels like we're relating the same feelings of like a loss of home, and or maybe that's a next project to do, like that sort of popped up for me.
I think it's always, people are people, right? People are people are people. And I think that you're always finding those moments of connection with the people that have come before every time you're writing something. When I was writing The Vanished Days, I mean, there are always moments, The Vanished Days happens in the time of the union between Scotland and England, and it's a very divisive time. So yeah, lots of points of connection there with families, divided against each other, and the time that came before the union, when the Jacobite movement is starting, and you've literally got families divided against each other. Like, my family is divided against each other in a lot of ways. I mean, there are people that don't talk to each other anymore in my family, and then it's it's you can see a lot of that happening. I worked my way through that a little bit too when I was writing Bellwether, the book that came before, that was set in the 7 Years' War on Long Island, which came just before the American Revolution. So you can kind of see that those same forces at work, where again, working through things that happen in my family history. So yeah, I mean, but you have to always be careful you're not creating a fictional, like, romanticizing. I write Scotland, right, a lot. I write European stuff, and there's this sort of like the sort of like hey diddly kilts and stuff that you have to be really careful. Scotland is not, that's not Scotland. And I think a lot of Scots, when they find out that you write Scottish set, especially Scottish set romantic stuff, they're kind of like, oh yeah, and then they pick it up, and you don't want them to, you've got to be careful with it, because Scotland is, it's got a very complicated history. It's got a very, very complicated history, and depending on where you are in Scotland, Scots are not a homogenous people either. Depending on where you are in Scotland, they have a different history. They stood on different sides of every issue, and they still stand on different sides of every issue. If you go into the middle of a pub in Edinburgh and you start talking about Scottish independence, you're going to get different takes on it, depending on where someone's from, where their family's from, where their history is. You're going to get people that like the Campbells, hate the Campbells. It's all it's a very fraught society, and you can't just go in there with this sort of, well, I got Scottish ancestry, because in truth you have to go back to to get to my Scottish ancestors, you would have to go back to the late 1700s. That does not make me Scot. That does not make me a Scot. That makes me a Canadian with Scottish ancestry, and that's a completely different thing. I have no right to go in there and opine on whether they should separate or not. If you want me to opine on whether the original union was any good or not, I got lots of opinions on that, because I've studied it. But whether they should do it now or not, I've got friends on both sides of the issue, and I don't want to offend anybody, so I stay out of that discussion. But you have to not romanticize it. You have to try to present it as it is, and try to be truthful as much as you can, I think.
Yeah. And I think romance, or books with romance themes, because Vanessa doesn't want me to get into trouble calling Island Queen romance, but they're books with romantic themes, at least, are one of the best ways to come at that. This is how this person was feeling. This is how their life was changing. There's this one perspective among many, and then you have a cast of characters that also have different perspectives, slightly tweaked, different loyalties, constricted by family responsibilities in a different way, that you're presenting a diverse landscape of views, which is how you get people to think about more complex issues and not fall into the trap of, oh, Scotland was like this, or oh, Jamaica was like this, and just rest on the stereotypes. We want people to think critically, right?
Absolutely. You know, one of the complexities, well, actually, before I did it, my Irish roots come from enslavement in South Carolina. But doing this research, I find Montserrat, and Montserrat is like the most Irish, Blackish place in the world, which blew my mind because I didn't understand it. But it makes sense of all the transportation and movement of commerce, et cetera, et cetera. Ireland and Scotland were deeply involved in the lives of many of the colonies. So you find this place that once again has the they celebrate St. Patrick's Day, but that's also one of the biggest slaughters of enslaved people because of a failed rebellion. And you know, it's just, but that's that nuance, right? I could see from just the things that I was reading, and there's a pride of Black people on the island for their Irish heritage. But when they dig into where do you get this Irish heritage from, it's because of the enslavement that happened. So when you do this research, there is so much shades of gray that you have to. I want to show the shades of gray on the page, but at the same time, not romanticizing the evil. Right? Enslavement is evil. No one wanted to be enslaved. The particular time frame that I write, everybody wants to be free. The American Revolution is happening. The French Revolution is happening. The Haitian Revolution is happening. And of course, on every single one of these islands, there are revolts happening. Because, and then just Catholic to Protestant oppressions that are going on. Everybody wants freedom, but can't understand why the other person who may not look like them or pray like them also wants freedom.
Right.
And to be able to carefully and with respect, because their viewpoints and what they held and their truths are different than we have today, or at least from our vantage point of right and wrong. You know, you have to pay attention and somewhat give honor and respect the ideals that were held. Not saying enforce, not saying I believe what they held, but just why did they come to believe the things that they believed? Why did they do the things that they did? A lot of them, once again, goes back to commerce, because you have to get money from somewhere, and this was the accepted norm. And you have to be very sensitive to that. One of the things that I find, one of my friends was like, why did I include that Dorothy actually owned slaves? She's like, you could have skipped that part. I complain about people whitewashing history. I complain about people hiding history. Why am I going to hide this? It's a fact. It was done. And she's not the only one. Everyone has dirty hands when it comes to enslavement. But those nuances of why one would do it when she's adamantly opposed to it, she hates the institution. You've got to be able to put all of that on the paper, and that's a respect of what's going on during the times, what people have lived through. And that's when I think historical fiction is strongest, is when you can put all of that on the page so that the reader can understand. They may not agree with, but they can understand at least why they're doing the things that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You have to fill the holes that, like a someone who's writing like a nonfiction can just say, oh, she held slaves, but you have to find the justification for why she held the slaves, right? So you have to fill that hole for the reader to make it make sense for the reader, to make it make emotional sense for the reader. And that's the difference between someone writing historical fiction and someone just writing history, I think.
Absolutely. And always, again, within that context, because the value systems of the 1700s differ from the 1800s, differ from the 1900s, differs from the 2000 plus.
Yeah. We had a question earlier that was about setting, speaking of home, will we ever see a novel set in Canada, Susanna? And so
I did actually set my very first novel ever that will never probably see the light of day again, was set in Canada. It was set in Nova Scotia. And but it was my very first novel ever written when I was like 25 years old. And it's like, it's not great. And it,
we're all growing. We're
yeah,
all
yeah.
getting
Well,
better every
I
day.
was super young. But also my novel, Every Secret Thing, parts of that take place in Canada, in Toronto. So it's my World War II spy novel.
Put that in the chat too. Yeah. We had another person mention, I'd love to see a novel set in Upper Canada, which is not what we might think of as Upper Canada today, including or involving loyalists. Yep.
There may be, I had actually planned to do a sequel to Bellwether. There's one in here somewhere, the sequel to Bellwether, that would take the heroine's brother Benjamin, and follow him and go up into Nova Scotia, not Upper Canada, but up into Nova Scotia, and then back down, following my ancestors, what actually happened to my ancestors, and bringing some people in. But you guys just went crazy down there, so it made it impossible for me to write a modern day story that went around without bringing in, it was sort of, I was starting it around 2016, and not really easy to do a modern day story set in 2016. Right. So I went a different way with what I was writing. So we've just shelved that one for now. And when things get a little more normal, maybe in the world at large, I will be able to do better modern day stories. I keep hoping, keep waiting for stuff to calm down a bit.
Right.
It's really hard right now.
It's really hard. For people that are doing like modern day stories, it's like super hard, not just the pandemic, but the fact that like the world is on fire. And, when you're trying to do a modern day story, you're trying to, especially if you're writing a modern day story that, and you want to, show the world as it is, and have people of, that aren't just all like, wasps walking around, it's a hard time. And it's hard to not bring a lot of that in. And that's not necessarily, something that fits in with, sort of, let's do a nice light romance and bring in this like really heavy, dark, nasty stuff that's going on in the world. So it's very hard to inhabit that a fascist place right now when you're writing a modern day story. It's not easy. So it was easy. It was nicer to kind of go back in the dual time all in the past. The one I'm working on now, I thought was going to be dual time all in the past, but I have a modern day group of characters that decided they were going to start moving in Edinburgh. So we'll see what happens. I'm a really slow writer, so I don't think it'll be finished till 2023. So maybe the world will get a little nicer. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Edinburgh can be a little calmer than some places because everybody's usually in a pub. So we'll try to.
There we go.
Yeah, we'll try.
History we're here for. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, history we're here for.
And you guys were talking earlier about having the people present who would be present and not having that be a hidden stage. And and also on the topic of earlier novels that we've grown up and away from, I set a novel in Nova Scotia because I'd fallen in love with that place, and it's not my home. I don't have any family records from there, but I loved it. So I set a young adult novel there, and I had done some research about the Mi'kmaq territory and interactions of 18th century Scots settlers and the Acadians who had left, and the native indigenous nations that were still there and how they were interacting. But and here's one of the things that I was very my mind was blowing up with at the HNS conference where I met Vanessa for the first time, is that I can have them in the novel. I can represent the story of the fact that they were all interacting, but I do not have the experience that is telling their story. So my choices to make them sympathetic or antagonistic are, you know, dripping with responsibility. And my choices as an author are going to reflect that I need them to be there for my 21st century responsibility as an author, but I can't tell a story from their point of view. And I wonder, like, if you have points or like reflections on that after this year of a lot of that being in the discussion about historical novels.
I'm a firm believer of research. If somebody is called to tell a story, then they need to do research. And I mean real research. I write very diverse books, but I've read thousands and thousands of books written by people who don't look like me, who don't have the same faith as I do, who aren't from South Carolina. So you got to do the work, and you got to talk to people. Even though I have West Indian heritage, Island Queen had a sensitivity reader. Sister Mother Warrior, which is set in Santo Domingo, which is present day Haiti, has sensitivity readers, because I'm coming in from a Judeo-Christian viewpoint. We're talking about Vodum and Voodoo. We're talking about Catholicism, all in the fabric of the Haitian Revolution. And it's not an insult to get a sensitivity reader. This is to make sure you do no harm. Every book should not do harm. Shouldn't, and it's so easy to not understand personal biases. It's so easy to be, what do you call it? You have to make sure you take yourself out of it. You give, it takes years to write these books. It takes so long to take more time just to make sure you get it right, because people are looking for representation, and they come in with their own biases, and they're reading your book, and you get something wrong that a sensitivity reader could have read, or somebody of that culture could have read and said that, or even you, for even writing this book. If you had read one book written by a Black person, written by a Spanish person, written by an Indian, written by somebody, you would have picked up on that this is hooey, or this is a bad stereotype that I've inflicted. People are drawn to write about the Civil War and slavery because they think the rich storytelling is the pain of what happened, and then there's a liberator that comes and frees the world and all is made right. I'm sorry, I'm not into porn pain. It's actually addictive to some people to want to just put the pain on the page. Pain has its place. I personally want to tell balanced story. So I want to show people who overcame, people, and everybody has a right to tell the stories they want to tell. But the ones that are most exciting to me have the nuances. I've learned something new. I've spent time in someone else's shoes. But I'm sensitive to every culture, every religion, every way of life that may have walked in these books. And people who don't want to do the work, don't do the work. That's fine. Don't put, because it's better than bad representation. Do what you know, and it's better than bad representation. And then uplift those that you know who have done the work, who are putting in there, and those are the books that need to be spotlighted.
Exactly what she said. I mean, like it's because you find and amplify and uplift the people that are doing stuff properly. Not every story is yours to tell. It's like it's okay to look. It's okay to come across a really good story and think it's a really good story and realize it's not yours. That there's a difference between telling a story as a person of the Mi'kmaq Nation and telling a story that involves characters who are Mi'kmaq. And if you're going to tell stories that have characters that are Mi'kmaq, then you seek out. I would seek out a couple of different people that are Mi'kmaq and say, would you be my sensitivity readers? This is what I pay. Pay them
Right.
because they're providing a service, and then talk to them beforehand. My first question is always, what do people get wrong? What do people always get wrong? Because there's probably a pile of stuff that people always get wrong that really irritate them.
Yeah.
And then work to create a character with a really good balanced life, and then send stuff to them to read through the process. That's what I did when I created Sam with Bellwether. I worked with a wonderful guy who was half Lenape, half Mohawk, half Kanyangeha, who helped me create Sam at the beginning, and then checked him all the way through, and then another writer who read Sam also at the end, and just like, because you can't create a character that represents every single Kanyangeha man, like it's not going to work. But you can create a man that convinces, a character that convinces, that is representative of one person, that someone's going to say, yeah, okay, I would buy that. I would believe he is representative of that community, and do little respectful things. Like, there were things that I was going to do that would have been disrespectful. Like, I was going to use a surname that actually came from the community, and the first man said, no, that's not something you do. But he helped me find a naming pattern that followed the naming pattern of the community, that so we created a name for Sam. And so it little things that that you think, even when you're trying to do the right thing, you can still put a foot wrong without meaning to. So it was all really, really useful and helpful. And I had Beverly Jenkins was helping me on that book, and because I was I had characters that were in the modern day story who were Black, and a major character, and I had characters in the past who were enslaved, and I had a free Black man in the past, and I wanted to make sure that everything was as good as I could make it. And and Bev was just wonderful, and again stopped me from putting a foot wrong. And she was like,
Bev is amazing and so generous.
Oh,
so
she
generous.
is. There are no words. There are absolutely no words for Bev. I mean, there just aren't. If you want someone that does everything right with historical fiction, Beverly Jenkins, anything by Beverly Jenkins is amazing.
Yes.
Start with, you can start with Indigo, but just anything she does is researched perfectly and executed perfectly. And but she is, why she doesn't have a series on Netflix or movies out, I have no idea, because she is just, an absolute queen as far as I'm concerned. But she is incredibly generous to other authors as well, and always there to give you support. And, just you ask her for something and she gives it unfailingly. And no, just an amazing person. So, that's what you tend to do, is you try to fill in those holes. There are people that will complain. It's like, well, I can't write what I want to write. I want to write. Well, go ahead. Nobody's telling an author you can't write anybody, but you're not going to be free from consequences.
I mean,
you can write what you want to write, but
and there's nobody's giving out cookies because
nobody's giving
it exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same as, I think, maybe this is just popped into my head, so it might be wrong, but is it the same as claiming like your rights are violated because you can't go into a Denny's without a mask on? Maybe.
No, but you always hear these people saying, well, I can't write as a, an 18th century, Black person or something. Well, you totally can. But, then you're putting yourself, then somebody can critique it too, because that's just the way it works. So if you're going to, make sure you do your job, make sure you do your work, and your work is to get that character as accurate as possible. But also realize that might not be your book. That might not be your book. Just
I mean,
one of the best things that I think it was Vanessa, but came up with at the HNS talk was that ask yourself why you need to write that voice. What is it about it that's drawing to you to that? Because that may help you get at like why maybe it's not the best thing for you, you know? Yeah.
well, is that the perspective you need? Like there's a character that, you know, that carries a lot of, she lives in my head a lot. Okay. I will probably never write her. The Violet in Bellwether is based on a real woman, Violet, who was held in slavery by my ancestor, Captain Christopher Hatch. And Violet is somebody that, you know, I carry with me a lot, and I can never talk about Violet without crying, because she was, we know a lot about Violet and we know nothing about Violet. We know that Violet, when she was an old lady, remembered the slave ship coming to take her away from Africa when she was a little girl. So we know she was taken as a child. We know that at some point Captain Christopher Hatch got her, bought her, or inherited her. We don't know. But we know that when he came north from New York, he brought her across the border into New Brunswick. So she had no say in any of that. She had no say in where she was moved and where her home was. She didn't get to choose. She had to leave the home she had. I don't know if her mother was with her. I don't know if her siblings were with her. I don't know what she remembers of her home other than the ship coming to take her away. I do know that she was moved around and my family was responsible for that. I do know that at the end of it all, she was able to marry a man named Reuben, and they had children together, and she had grandchildren, and she died as an old woman, but I don't know what her life was like. And I do know that my family was responsible for that. I know that there is an entire family, generations of people that had their roots in Nova Scotia that are there because my family dragged this young woman there. And, you know, so that she occupies a lot of real estate in my head. You know, I think about her and I wonder what she looked like, and I wonder what she thought, and I wonder what she, you know, where she would have been if we hadn't done that, and what she would have become if we hadn't done that. So, you know, I put her in the book and gave her a different ending than she got in real life. But I couldn't write as Violet because I don't know what Violet thinks. I don't know what Violet feels. And that's not my story to tell. That's maybe for somebody else to tackle, you know, from Violet's perspective. That's an example of, you know, that's a story where to me, it's an interesting story. To me, it's a woman's voice who has been erased, but my family did the erasing. My family, you know, shut that woman down. But it's not for me to put her on the page because that's not my story. But I can put her there and give her a voice that she was denied in a certain way as an apology, right? And just sort of leave it there, and hope that sort of, you can never cross out the red in the ledger, but you can balance it a bit.
I mean, and just the acknowledgement and the sensitivity which you approach Violet, that's work. That's to me, that's the beauty of where we're coming. I mean, there's lots of darkness that's happening in the world right now. Lots of things are scary, but you wouldn't necessarily hear Susanna's level of sensitivity from mainstream 10 years ago. Right. There you would more so hear the attitude of people trying to cover this up and hide it. And Susanna's not responsible for this. Her father's not responsible. This is going back centuries to get to this level. But that acknowledgement of Violet as a human being, that's that level of nuances we were talking about home. We were talking about, that's that sensitivity levels that you want to see on the page, that you want to feel, and you want to understand their lives, and knowing what your story is and what your story isn't is very extremely important. When I found, it took about 10 years to put all the pieces of Dorothy Kerwin's life together. Dorothy left no diary that we could find. But looking at her life, but I had years, I had dates, and then I had all these documents of people who talked about Dorothy because she was actually famous. People would come to her parlor in Demerara, politicians of the day, and sit around just to be there because she was such a great conversationalist. And so studying over this, a voice came to me in my head. Is it her voice? No, but to me, it was her voice, or at least a way to do honor to this woman who was wiped off the history book. Her will is archived in the UK. People knew of her because they're writing about her in her journals. I've people writing letters back saying, I just saw Doll Thomas in Glasgow with her 17 grandkids. Wow. The pride of being able to take, many of us can't get through Walmart's, and she's taking 17 grandkids to Glasgow because she wanted everyone to see the world that money, that all the pain and suffering and building these businesses, the world that is opened up to her because she got them free and she's getting them educated. She took them with her so that they could see the world. These levels of nuances, to be able to take a character like that, like Dorothy, and not make her perfect, or at least not show her perfect on the page, because that's the other tendency we have, is now we make these perfect women who've done no wrong and they're sainthoods. No, Dorothy was messy. And you need to be able to show that on the page, the messiness of life, those gray issues of life, and to explain it. So there's a lot of work. I guess what we're saying is there's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of thought that goes into it. And we want to be careful that somehow we bring honor to the people we're writing, honor to the times. And honor is more so not in gratifying it, but just to say we took the time to put the pieces together to tell the story of what happened during these events that we're trying to showcase in historical fiction.
She was a force.
Yes. And I've got like 4 other big topics to cover, but I realize we're at the hour, so I'm going to shift our mode here. You guys have been great guests and like really, really bringing it. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
We totally got off topic. We just, we're like home, but that's the best. That's the best kind of conversation sometimes, is when you start talking about, because home is, in a way, people.
Lots of things.
And it's lots of things. Like, it's people, it's land, it's place. It's like, and then, you can't contain writers when you get us in a room anyway. We do this. This is what
that
we
is
do.
True.
So totally off topic. But in a fun way.
Pop up one of the questions that sort of talks about what we were talking about. This is my friend Martha at the Self-Righteousness channel. Is there always a touch of romanticizing history and history-based work, or is it possible to acknowledge that times were rotten in some ways while keeping a certain glamour about historical fiction? Maybe just noodle on that, and then we can switch over to my lightning round of questions.
I think there's a bit of both. I think sometimes people romanticize history. And I think sometimes people go way the other way. I think sometimes people have a tendency to overcompensate and make history, make the times seem more, horrible than they actually were. Like, you'll always hear about people like throwing. My mother would just shoot me for saying "like" that many times in a sentence too. I can hear my mother's voice and stop saying "like." This way. But you always hear people talking about the chamber pots, for example. Okay, the streets would have been disgusting with all those chamber pots being thrown at. Well, when I was doing the research for the Vanished Days, turns out Edinburgh actually had a very, very sophisticated system of garbage disposal and disposal of human waste from the mid 1600s. It wasn't that bad. I mean, you had to put your waste out. But you put it out in neat little piles in specified places at a specified time, like from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning, sort of thing. And then the wagons would come by and scoop it all up while everybody was asleep, and they would take it out of town and spread it. And so it wasn't like people were just pitching it out on your head as you were walking past.
Yes. This is where our medical establishment was born, really. So
yeah, so it was kind of like so you. But if you read historical novels, you would think that you were forever cleaning your hat off because everybody was walking underneath these windows with everybody throwing stuff out, and it was stinky, and it was this, and it was that. They actually had a pretty good sanitary system in town. They also had lights that they lit that at certain times. All the houses had to have a certain number of lights with it. So it didn't look that bad. People did actually bathe, not necessarily like we bathe and shower, but people, the idea that someone would go through the entire year without taking that basin of water that they have, museum curator, basins were made, they made basins from Roman times, right? So what do you think you do with a basin of water? You wash your face, you wash your armpits, you wash your privates, you wash all that. Just because you don't immerse yourself totally in water does not mean you're not bathing yourself. We've all sponge bathed. So people were a little bit cleaner than we give them credit for. People brushed their teeth with salt. It wasn't like as disgusting as everybody thinks. So people do tend to over dramatize the awfulness of the past and unromanticize the past a little bit more sometimes than they romanticize it, and but what they do is they definitely whitewash the past, and they definitely take gay people out of the past, and they definitely take transgender people out of the past. I find transgender people all the time in my research. They just didn't call them that. It was just, that's just that person that
it's just Phil.
Phil who wears a dress, but or
Literally.
or this woman who dresses in man's clothing and has always dressed in man's clothing, and we just accept her because she dresses in man's clothing, and every now and then she takes a sword and goes and fights, but it's just what would you call them, right? And, oh, she lives with this woman and has always lived with this woman, and so it was just called a different thing back then, but they've always been there. So, and then the historians kind of left that part out. But when you're reading the actual letters and stuff of the time, it's not new. Nothing's new. So historians curated all this stuff all along the way. And because historians curated this stuff, and a lot of novelists tend to go from historians and not from the primary documents, a lot of it gets left out. So if you go to the primary documents or to more modern historians who are using primary documents that have just come to light, then you'll get a more accurate view of what the past actually was. So,
and that does sound like I have a better system. And the thing is, it's what your story is. There are a number of people who I firmly believe are pain addicted. So they choose a point in time, and that's their story, and they're bringing, and those are important stories. Many of them can be important stories. I tend to choose, and I think Susanna tends to choose, stories that are wider. So there may be moments of pain, but then there may be moments of the important meeting, the ball, or what, these things that happen. So in Dorothy's life, the periods of enslavement are horrendous. But then nearing the end of the book, she's giving one of the fabulous balls, subscription dinners for the governor of Barbados. You get the opposite, but you get the opposite perspective of these things. So you can have some of the glamour of the past in these stories, but it's what is the story, and it's got to be appropriate to the story. I tend to choose things that are I like the word sweeping for a reason. If we can move you along and put things in context, those are the kind of things I want to say.
It's where you end the story. It's all in knowing where you begin and where you end the story. because any life has, you know, good moments and bad moments. Any story has good moments and ups and downs and stuff. But where you, as the novelist, choose to cut that story off determines whether it's going to be a happy ending or a sad ending.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I my argument is always any story has a happy ending if you end it in the right place, right? You know, like if you know, that's how you can have a movie like Young Victoria, where
Mhm.
you know you end it when she marries. You know, not
Albert.
when she marries, but you know,
Right.
when she and Albert are still happy, not when he's dead. You know, like it's a type of thing. Like it's
Cut it the right spot.
cut it in the right spot, and it's a happy ending. You
Editing
know,
is important, y'all.
editing
Yeah.
is everything. So you know, but
And it's
it's knowing.
the themes, because
Yes,
I firmly think that there is a space to examine the hard parts of history, but I try to keep my readers safe, and so that they know I'm looking for power women. I want to tell the undiscovered, the hidden stories of power women, women who've done something that makes them remarkable, and put those out so that I'm force fitting. I'm finding, trying to make sure we get those happy ever afters, or not happy ever afters, but those hopeful endings that shows, you know, they survived this, that I can survive this. I can live past the hardships.
that's a good way to look at it. It's wonderful.
And we're going to hop on over to diverse book recommendations. Got a banner
Oh.
for this. Woo! So we mentioned Beverly Jenkins earlier. I would definitely encourage everyone to go look her up. She's got a huge
about that.
backlist, lots to choose from, easy to find in used bookstores, I would imagine. So shouldn't break your budget. But I did seed people in advance. So hopefully you've got some things to put up here. Yep. I'm going to be jumping into a buddy read with the channel Bria starting tomorrow with this tomerific tome, Maryse Condé's Segu, which is a sweeping historical epic. So if you like Susanna's and Vanessa's books, this may be up your alley. But what have you guys got to bring to the party to show our friends here?
You like big books?
Yes.
Ooh.
Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm going to say
I don't want to hear anybody ever tell me my book is long.
That is a doorstop. Look at that.
This is
beautiful.
Love Songs by W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée Phantom Jeffers.
She's fantastic.
Lovely.
Yeah. She was also on A Mighty Blaze, and she had a fantastic interview. Love it.
I've got a little stack. Have you got more, Vanessa?
Oh, you keep going.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything's on mine.
Okay, I'll do one, and you do one. This is The Calligrapher's Daughter by Eugenia Kim. I used to live in South Korea for a little bit. This is set in Korea. This is a beautiful, beautiful book. So this is, look, it's not
it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful book. I just love that color too. That's why, you know how you totally pick books up sometimes just because of the color drew me to it, because that's celadon green, which is like a Korean pottery, and then she's wearing a hanbok, which is the Korean national dress. And then I started reading it and loved it. Okay, you go.
Speaking of beautiful dress.
Oh yes, that was
Wild
Women
in Blues.
Oh yes,
Denny S. Bryce.
Her.
I'm doing an event with Denny and Bev in December 2nd on Denny's birthday. So I'm looking forward to that. That's a great book too, by the way. It's also
It is. It's so good. It's really good on Libro.fm. For anyone who's been here before, that is my signature hand motion for propping up Libro.fm because they're a great audiobook. Yeah.
Anything by Jeannie Lynn. I love Jeannie. I love Jeannie as a person and as a writer. Jeannie writes these amazing, she writes a variety of things. She writes mystery, she writes steampunk, she writes romance, but they're set in the ancient Chinese dynasty, I would say.
Nice.
But they're amazing. This was her first one, Butterfly Swords. And they're just read them. That's all I will say.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Everybody needs World War II books.
Yay! That's
Sisters in Arms.
Yep.
By Kia Alderson.
That's just this year, isn't it? That's just like new.
Like a few months. Yeah.
excellent book.
Mhm.
That's Wench
Oh, yes.
by Dylan Perkins Valdez.
Mhm.
Ooh.
That's I love that cover. Another one that the cover. Well, actually, she spoke at the last 2 years ago at the last Historical Novel Society when she did a lunchtime.
Mhm.
It was a luncheon keynote, and normally at keynotes you just kind of kick back and eat your salad and stuff like that. And she had me pulling out her keynote, had me pulling out like pen and paper to take notes. It was that good. It was kind of like, this is a whole nother session. I need to be taking notes for this. It was just an amazing session.
She's amazing.
So
She's amazing.
yeah, love that book.
Nice.
Another Yellow Wife. by
Oh, Yellow Wife.
Oh, I love that one too.
Sadika Johnson. I'm like typing these in and trying to make sure I don't.
Okay. And this is the last one I had on my shelf because everything else is loaned. Everything else I have is loaned. But anything by Alyssa Cole from this series, I love this series.
Yes.
This is the last of it, the Unconditional Freedom one. This is a Civil War sort of spy series.
Yes.
It's excellent.
Mhm.
But this is the third one, isn't it? The third one?
That's the third one.
That's the third
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, the two girls and a guy. Two girls and a guy. That's how I remember it.
An Extraordinary Union is the first one.
Uh-huh.
A Hope Divided is the second one, and then Unconditional Freedom is the. I keep this one close to my desk because of the man on the cover. He likes to look at me when I'm writing. So.
Barrett, did you hear that? Barrett, did you hear that?
The last one I have is this one, and this is particularly what we've been talking about. This is a two people, Victoria Christopher McMurray and Marie Benedict, got together to tell Belle's story, Belle DaCosta's story in the personal librarian. She's the librarian for Carnegie.
Yeah.
And she had to pass as white in order to keep her job. So the two women, one Black author, one white author, they are telling this very multifaceted tale. So the personal librarian.
And
Yes,
anything by Piper Hughley.
Oh yes,
Piper Hughley is really.
She's got the designer of Jackie Kennedy's dress coming out next year.
Cool.
So
she's excellent as well.
Nice.
So yeah.
And that was a brilliant we
did that very well.
Ages, because they're all different periods. Personal librarian is like the period I'm trying to get into, like 1910-ish, and
yeah.
I love it. I love it. And you guys, I just want to point out, in case anyone doesn't realize that at this point, are mainly focused on 18th century. I think that's like your main bailiwick, if you will. But yeah, lots of stuff all across the ages to dive into with these recommendations. Thank you so much for coming so prepared. That was excellent. I wanted to jump into some. I jumped and I hopped and I jumped. So now I'm back to, what book are you reading now? Lightning round.
Oh my gosh.
I figured that would be an easy one.
I don't know. I don't have it out here with me.
Ooh.
Oh, Beatrice.
Yes.
Only Woman in Moscow, Beatrice Williams. Excellent.
I do have it with me. Hang on a second. I do have it with me. Okay. Mine is.
And there are diverse characters in this, as not as the primaries, but in the book. So I think it's very well done.
Excellent.
Okay. Mine is over on the floor. But it is the first of Milla Vane's barbarian romances. So
okay.
sort of like you count them as diverse. I would count them as diverse. I'm counting them as diverse. I have a little attachment to Mel Jean Brooke, Milla Vane, and she's my go-to prize for finishing a novel. So when I finished the last one, I finished The Vanished Days, I let myself read The Kraken King, which I'd been saving on the shelf for a very long time. And then that kind of led me to her new stuff. So I'm just starting that. So.
Barbarian romance. You heard it here.
All
right, next question. Fave writing snack or drink? We had a little bit of discussion there, but.
That will be a hazelnut latte. Yes. And I love pistachios. That is my cheat snack go-to.
Nice.
Already shelled.
Nice.
I have to do a soy hazelnut latte because milk makes my psoriasis like break all over my face peels off, which is very unattractive. But soy hazelnut latte for the drink and a snack. Wow.
You can do one or the other. It wasn't.
Yeah, soy hazelnut latte is like sort of all-in-one snack for me. That's everything.
And you can get the the Starbucks hazelnut syrup off of Amazon rather inexpensively.
Or you can get the deluxe at-home treatment, which go to.
I don't know whether they'd even sell it. I don't know whether they'd sell it to me up here. Like it used to be able to like actually go through the drive-through and they would get you the bottle. And there was a really nice person at my local Starbucks that would sneak me a bottle of it. But now with the pandemic,
Black
like
market.
everything is all different. Yeah.
Yeah, they've taken all the hazelnuts from which has led me to actually get the Mr. Coffee barista that steams the milk, any type
That's
of
what I
milk.
was gonna say. It's on Instagram. Yes.
And so I'm making my own hazelnut lattes.
I do them in the microwave. If you do it in the microwave in a cup for like 2 minutes and 20 seconds, it actually sort of steams it too. So
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
Okay.
in
Black
a pinch,
market.
if your Mr. Coffee breaks down,
Yes.
and your stuff.
So far.
Yeah, black. So we got Aiken, South Carolina engineers and hazelnut latte.
I love you. We're gonna have to do something later.
Very cool. This is the
So
first
you're
event
going
we've
on a
done
writing?
together. This is the very first event we've ever done together. This is very cool.
I think before that we just had drinks at the bar or something.
Yeah, yeah. Which counts. I mean, we drinking at the bar counts.
Yes. Points of kismet. I liked it.
Yeah.
If you're going on a writing retreat, I think I labeled this knowing which one you guys are going to, but you can surprise me. Mountains or beach?
Beach.
Really? Okay. Susanna surprised me. I thought she'd go for the pine trees and the mountains.
Oh no. Water. I grew up on a beach. I grew up on a beach. In fact, one of the things when you were talking about home and stuff like that, I had this thing all prepared. I was going to read you like about what when you were talking about whether people or place is home, and I have that line in I think it's the Rose Garden where it's like that people are the it's never the place but the people you share it with that are the cause of your happiest memories type thing, which sounds really good when it's true in a sense, but I always think of like the Kamau Brathwaite poem South, where it just sings to me, where he's talking about, he's got a line in there that is, we who are born at the ocean can never seek solace in rivers. And I think that like isn't it beautiful? The whole poem, I mean, oh my God, it's like, by these shores I was born, sound of the sea came in at my window, life heaved and breathed in me then with the strength of that turbulent soil. And it's just like, he's writing it from London and he's like walking by the Thames and it's just the saddest thing. And he's just dreaming of home. And home to him is the ocean. Well, if you've ever been on one of the Great Lakes, you can't see the other side. It's a lake, and my favorite thing to do up there when I was a kid, and still whenever I go up, is like it's a big white sand beach, and I walk out up to my knees and I stand and I just let the waves come. And coincidentally, kind of like what my character does in Bellwether, that's my calming, soothing thing, and it just it's peaceful. Nice. But when I've stood in that, I'm happy near an ocean, but I'm not happy near inland. I can't live inland. I can't be near something like that. I need the sound of the waves and I need the
water.
I need the water. Yeah.
All right. Water babies. Okay. Best platform to connect with your readers. What do you think?
Twitter. Instagram. Yeah. My readers are probably on Facebook, but Twitter's where I am. Which is probably not a bad thing because I'm very mouthy, right? So my readers are probably happier not knowing that. They're probably happier if they're over on Facebook thinking I'm much more sedate. But,
I don't know. You've got some fans who came here, so I guess we'll put it out to them.
Nice.
Oh, Kristen McKendry, watching this from very near the shore of Lake Huron. Wow.
Nice.
Sound of the waves. Very cool. All right. And then last thing, what is your next book project, setting, and or pub date if you have it? And this is a loaded question. And I'm very excited for this one.
I want to hear Vanessa's first.
Okay. So I have three pub dates coming out in 2022.
Awesome.
So for historical romance lovers, the book 3 in the Rogues and Remarkable Women series, that we have, a Duke, the Lady, and the Baby, an Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler. And this one is A Duke, the Spy, an Artist, and a Lie.
Love it.
I love it too.
So that one is coming out in March. Yeah, I think. March of 2022. It's like that March, April-y thing, because like the last.
Yep.
So, then in July, you will get Sister Mother Warrior, the 2 women who shaped the Haitian Revolution.
Yes, I cannot wait.
Yes. And then in August, you will get Murder in Westminster, the first of the Lady Worthing mysteries.
Love it.
Yeah.
That is so cool. A
Thank
brand
you.
new series. A brand new series.
Stuff.
Yes.
Lady Worthing.
Mm-hmm.
And Susanna, you told us you're a slow writer.
Oh,
and
I'm
that you're
super
working
slow.
on a project. So just maybe you want to reveal.
No,
where
I write at the speed of paint drying, man.
Yes,
I'm
where
super
is
slow.
it set?
No, the book I'm working on now is I'm supposed to turn it in. I say optimistically. I'm supposed to turn it in the spring of 2023. And so it will be published in 2024 because they always do it like a year after. And it's called The Lesser Stars, which is from a poem by a really cool New Zealand poet. And it's a dual time, and it's set in the modern day part is set hopefully in 2024 when the world is a little calmer and hopefully America is still there. And I'm rooting for you. I always have my books come out in election years. I don't know why I do that.
Just get it in before the election.
Hang in there, right? Everybody. The past part is 1613. So I'm really attached to the Murray and Graham families, the Abercrombie and Inchbraeke. And so instead of letting go of them and moving forward, I'm going backward to 1613. And one of the Murrays was the right-hand man to Prince Henry, who was King Charles's older brother, King Charles I's older brother. And Prince Henry died when he was 18 in mysterious circumstances. So it kind of starts that year that he died and takes us there. And it's a road trip romance, which I love writing. I love writing road trip romances. And so it's, and the hero in both the hero in the past and the heroine in the present are related to Robbie McMorrin, who's one of my readers' favorite characters. Robbie from The Shadowy Horses and The Firebird, right? So so there may be a little bit of psychic stuff happening in the books.
Yay! We love it. Awesome.
It'll be fun. I have no idea what they're going to do. I'm at that point in the book where I just kind of like everybody's just going on the page and they're just starting, and I don't know any of them yet really well. And I kind of think I know what they're going to do, but I don't know what they're going to do. So it's always fun.
All right.
But London will look like London looked. You can count on that. So it's really been fun learning about it. It's really been fun learning about it. And,
yes, because we historical fiction authors like the research period. I think that's highlight, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to wrap this up by saying thank you so much, ladies. We're treated to your books whenever they come out. We're excited to hear that there's so many new projects coming. Just wanted to put some little advertisements for what's coming on my channel so people can look forward to tomorrow. We have a productivity sprint with Barrett Laurie and Zarina Masha. We're going to be authoring for NaNoWriMo or doing other productive activities, hopefully. Then on Tuesday, I'm doing a Native November spotlight. So I'm just going to outline some of the things that are part of the Indigathon tag, which are some questions about Indigenous and First Nations peoples in your area or books that you're reading written by them and about them. So we'll be doing that on Tuesday for November theme here. And then next Sunday, I'll be doing my Patreon Bookish Chat with author Emily Harris. So getting into some details of her book writing career. So hopefully you'll stick around for those and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for joining, ladies and readers and lovers of historical fiction. So go forth and buy the books. The links are in the chat to go to Bookshop and support your historical fiction authors. Thank you so much, everybody. I will